And so you and I met at a conference at Duke INE, right? A women's conference. It was Women's Day at Duke INE.
Yep.
And I was giving a talk on imposter syndrome.
Indeed.
And you and I talked after that. And so where were you at that point when we met in your business? Why was that conference appealing to you? What did you get out of it?
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
So I think for me, imposter syndrome is something that's always in the back of my mind that I'm trying to screw off. I think the fact that I even acknowledge that it's there sometimes is better than I have been in many parts of my life. I have a really wonderful business mentor that I've worked with all my time while I've been at Fuqua, which he's a proud Keenan Flagler grad, not Fuqua grad, but he's delightful, Patrick Huron. And I'll ask him sometimes questions or I'll have concerns and he'll be like, "You're the only person that's worrying about that."
What's an example?
Like, I'll wonder about hiring, if I'm making the right decision. Like, for instance, we had someone that we were looking at for a position and it just didn't feel right. And I was like, am I personally intimidated by how amazing she is? Am I getting in the way of myself? And he was like, no, you have good business sense. Like, only you are worried about if you're the problem. The fact that you're spending time stressing about if you are the issue, if this is a bad fit because you aren't able to handle it, says so much more about your own self-awareness than the average person has. And like, you just need to give yourself the grace that like, it's your instinct speaking. You should trust your gut. If you think it's not a good fit, it's probably a gift to them that it's not a good fit and that you're not going to try to force fit something that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And like, I had to hear it from him. Everyone else around me was like, no, it makes great sense. And I was like, I don't know. And it was the moment that he was again like, no, you are experiencing imposter syndrome. You've convinced yourself that somehow you're the problem here, when like, you're the person trying to hire someone, you're extending a job, you're trying to build a team, and it's okay if it's not a good fit. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the greater culture of the company.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And it took someone who wasn't your friend, who was kind of this objective figure, to tell you that in a way that you could hear.
Yeah. And especially Patrick he's the type of guy that I don't know how he does it, but he always knows how to ask that question that I didn't even want to ask myself. And so like, he is just a really great sounding board, and he and many other mentors I've had have gotten really good at hearing what I don't say more than what I say. I'm known for being a bit loquacious. And so it's helpful to surround yourself with people who know you well enough that they know when you're not even facing the problems that you don't want to deal with, because it's the things you don't want to talk about or the things you don't want to work on, which, especially as a female founder, there's so many unsaid challenges that we go through and that I think women in general experience as a part of business that we just kind of ignore and assume like that's normal. And it takes somebody else from the outside being like, that's not normal and it's okay that it's not normal. Like, acknowledging, right, putting a name to it and then working through it is the healthier way to deal with it, instead of trying to pretend that what you're experiencing is abnormal or is wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I'm hearing so much is just like how traditional gender roles play a role in being a founder, which is overly caring for others, overly empathetic, putting other people's needs before yours, and how you're becoming increasingly aware of how that proclivity does not serve you as a CEO.
Yeah. It makes things hard. I mean, having a hard conversation about like, you're not the best fit, and it is me and it is you, not it's me, it's you and not you.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. It was heartbreaking. I hung up on the call. I'm sure she was upset too and like wanted to sob. It was that hard. And it doesn't mean that empathy is not a positive trait to have in a leader. It's learning the balance between finding empathy and, to some extent, having that empathy to see that it's respect that makes you have hard conversations, not pity, not sympathy, right? It's the fact that business is business and there's a huge amount of personal component, but there's also just some level of understanding what's best for the organization and making hard choices.
Yeah. Beautifully said. So I wanted to lead with, we got just like congratulations on getting Series A.
Seed.
Is it seed?
Seed.
Oh, seed, not A. Important. Congrats on your seed round. How did it feel when you first found out?
Like someone was punking me. Which is probably not what you should say aloud, but
it's real.
Yeah, I think my co-founder and I, we had just before closing, we had some challenges as a business around IP, and we'd been back and forth talking to lots of lawyers, and it felt multiple times like everything was dead in the water. And talked to another mentor who was like, I don't know how you're going to get through this one. Like, if anybody can do it, it's you, but I don't know how else to help you. Go forth and do your best. And it just, like, we had gotten to a point, both Layla and I, where it was like, well, I guess we're going to have to apply for jobs. I guess we're going to have to go out there and, hit the ground running again. And like, it's just not going to work. And then having found kind of in the 10th hour, truly mission aligned investors who were there for the long haul, who understand that we don't do this because it's just a profitable model, but because it has potential to change the world. It definitely felt like I had been punked. Like it was all fake. Like we were already in COVID times. We couldn't get together and celebrate, right? Like we're all trapped in our homes. And so like it was an anticlimactic Friday night where it felt like I should have prepared something like a bottle of champagne or I don't know, a happy dance, something. And instead it was just kind of like, I think it took a good week before I could even say aloud, like, we've done it. We raised funding, because it just felt like everything was still so touch and go that it didn't feel real until it was truly real. Like watching money come into a bank account feels real.
Uh-huh. Hell yeah. So if you could distill down, like, so we're kind of on this other side of like, okay, the success happened. You found the mission alignment with an investor. It was a match. The money's in the bank account. But if you could look back and distill to like 2 or 3 things, what do you attribute your success to?
Layla and I, for better or worse, are eternal optimists. I think it is one of our probably blind spots, but we just always feel like there's got to be a way. There just has to be a way. And especially when you're so devoted to doing what's best, not just what's going to be easiest or make the most money or be the sexiest to talk about. It's so easy. You believe, we believe at our core that what we're doing can revolutionize the way we feed every single human being on this planet. And when you believe that and you know that in your core, like the reason you do this is because this is going to help parents and babies across this world. You keep thinking, all right, that didn't work. What's next? We've got to make it work. How do we make it work? There has to be a way. And so the fact that we've been able to continue to pivot and to turn and to ask, I think there's a bit of luck in any fundraising, right? But there's definitely a component where we just believed that there had to be a path forward. And even at the moments where we both jokingly were like, all right, I guess we're going to go get jobs. Like it was never really real, you know? It wasn't reality. We weren't out there like hitting the pavement because we were still trying to figure it out, trying to make it work.
You believed in it. And, I'm struck by the, where optimism leads, right? Like optimism has this direct line to relentlessness because of your belief in your mission. And there was a direct tie between relentlessness and trying and not taking no to success. And like I read somewhere, entrepreneurs like hear the word no differently than like normal people. But I think that
I think that's probably my problem. I've been one of those people who's like super goody two shoes, but not a rule follower, which is a very strange personality in general. But like, I like to please people. I like to make sure everybody's happy. I want to keep everybody aligned and on board, but I also don't think rules apply to me. So I feel like entrepreneurs and criminals probably have a lot in common. In very creative and generally see the world just in kind of a different series of suggestions is kind of how I would describe much of the obstacles that I've come up against in my career so far. Yeah,
that's beautiful. What advice do you have for aspiring female entrepreneurs? And maybe this is let's start there.
I think it's important right now in our modern kind of Me Too era to think less about being a female entrepreneur and think more about what strengths you have as an entrepreneur. I think all too often in kind of with the movement that's occurred, everyone feels like, oh, well, I've been disadvantaged. I have to overcome all of this disadvantage that I've received. And for some female entrepreneurs, that's 100% true. right? Like, especially our Black and brown female entrepreneurs, like they face incredible hurdles that I will never face in my life because of the privilege that I have. But for a lot of us, I think in some ways our gender makes us naturally more resilient, naturally more optimistic, able to think creatively. We've been told no a lot of times in our lives and are pretty good at figuring out how to get around it. And so I don't keenly feel my gender as a part of being an entrepreneur a lot of the time. I feel the fact that I've had to spend much of my career and life continuing to evolve and to pivot actually as an advantage. And I think one of the reasons that we're starting to see female companies do better in some metrics than male-led companies, because we've overcome a lot already.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to do with the way we're raised as women. It has to do with our natural biological differences. But I really think entrepreneurs who have already just naturally throughout their life kind of rolled with the punches and tried to figure out how to make the best of things are really well prepared, and females often tend to fit that bill nicely. So don't focus on the fact that you're a woman, focus on the fact of all the benefits that you've already had and experienced that are going to make you a better entrepreneur.
Yeah. Resilience.
Yep.
Is like the word that's coming to mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. What can the world expect next from BIOMILQ?
That's a good question. I mean, we're spending a lot of time now getting back to the lab and just really working technologically and trying to further and optimize our product. And then a lot of my energy now is going into talk to parents and caregivers and consultants and lactation consultants, doctors, academics. I've got a whole list of people. Because we can't create this in a vacuum. I mean, if we truly want to see the incremental change we hope to, this isn't something we do alone. It's not our fight as BIOMILQ as two ladies so far. So we're expanding our team. We're talking to lots of people with expertise and opinions in the space, and talking to our end consumers, really trying to make sure that the product fits them the way that they need it to in the moment that they need it. And especially with something like infant feeding, which is such a personal experience, this is not a one-size-fits-all type of solution. You don't just roll something out and go, yep, that's going to do it. So we're really cognizant of that a lot of the work we have in front of us to make sure that we're co-creating with other stakeholders who really are going to have a huge impact on this end goal of creating better infant nutrition.
Yeah, I love that. I love the consumer-centric focus, and people would be proud. All your professors would be proud. And BIOMILQ was something you started during Fuqua or pre-Fuqua?
During Fuqua, yeah. So Layla and I were actually introduced by a mutual friend who's also a Fuqua alumni. And we both were just bizarrely obsessed with nutrition and using science for solving malnutrition. And it was kind of just a match made in heaven. So that was end of last summer, I guess, summer 2019. And like any good founder, I spent the first months trying to convince her she could find a real CEO. I could help her find somebody who was more experienced and, fit better, wasn't a full-time student. And it was clear we took a trip to San Francisco in January just to meet advisors and find mentors and speak with other folks who've gone kind of down this journey. And we were accidentally fundraising and didn't know it. So it was very clear that at that point on, we had started a business, not just a project, as we had called it, and that there was such a strong need for it that it was kind of like pouring rocket fuel on us, that it was just an obvious fit for so many people, and we were ready to go. Yeah.
I'm really inspired by you. I'm really inspired by the company. I knew you were going to be a big deal when I met you. I know it's easy to say that in hindsight, but I knew. I talked about your business for a long time after that to my network. So I'm thrilled to see your early success, and I have no doubt that there will be much more.
I do have a little anecdote I would love to share in the article if you are willing. So we were talking to another female entrepreneur in the biotech space Tuesday, I guess, who in her own right is incredibly impressive, one of the first team members at Just, and now has gone off and launched her own venture. And we were talking about how being a female entrepreneur doesn't feel weird until you have just a moment where you look around and are confused. And so her anecdote was that she went and spoke at this conference with a whole bunch of other guys in the tech space. some Y Combinator event, and she was 7 months pregnant at the time, and no one offered her a chair for 7 hours. Like, she just stood in all of these different rooms, room to room, and she was like, I felt like it wasn't my place to be like, someone needs to get up and give me a chair, because I've never been the person who needs something or like needs help. But she was like, it like floored me, like it just shocked me. And we realized, in kind of joking, that we've also had a moment where we looked around and we're just like, what has happened? And that was, we were speaking to an investor, and he asked, well, why can't people just use wet nurses? Like, why does this product need to exist? Can't a family just hire a wet nurse? And I remember just like in my mind being like, what? I'm usually quick on my feet, and it was like a 30-second silent delay, where the fact that someone even like thought that question made sense to ask in like the context of how wet nurses have evolved in the US out of slavery and out of all kinds of other really negative and pernicious history, to then just be like, well, can't you just like hire someone to live in your home and feed your child instead of this product, was just like, that's not a competitive product, my friend. And he didn't mean anything by it. He's like a delightful guy. We've had many conversations since, but I think like back to the being a female entrepreneur and resiliency, like that is not a question that the average person would get. And especially as a woman talking about breast milk and breastfeeding access and history and otherwise, like just the level of lack of thought that's been put in this space and spaces that apply to women and in femtech and health in general, has been at times truly astounding. So when you find investors or you find allies, male or female, who really get it and really see why it's important, the rest is easy. Talking about the business model, talking about that's the easy part. It's really trying to show people why something matters when they don't have the personal experience to even begin to understand why asking about a wet nurse is an inappropriate question to bring up in a meeting.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. I'm excited to include that. And it got me thinking about another question, which is like, I've started a tiny business of just me, and I can imagine like, so, and I have gotten some haters. I've gotten some haters. And it's so funny, right? Like they just come out. And it's just like not asked, not provoked, just like, you're like, what are you doing? Like, this is not a thing. This is not a business. Like, you can't do this. Like all of the haters. And so mansplainers, lots of mansplainers, lots of haters, lots of people who just kind of sit back in their chair while you're talking and just say like, well, have you even thought about like how formula is gonna, like, this is a non-starter, right? Like people who just like do that. Have you experienced that? I don't know what to call it, by haters. And B, like, what advice do you have for dealing with those people?
Yes,
who just don't see your vision and
yeah. Yes, have experience actually from a fem tech investment group. The only gentleman that they had on their committee was somebody that we talked to, and talked to him in person, and then had a phone call where he took the call while he was checking out at a Trader Joe's. Could tell based on what they were saying in the background
how polite they were.
I love a good Trader Joe's trip, so I was like, I hope you're getting stuff. If you don't have dark chocolate peanut butter cups in your cup, like, we're not friends. But just the like lack of respect for not even for me as a person, but for the idea is what really gets me. Like, you don't know me from somebody else the first time you meet me, and you can have your preconceived notions. Like, I'm an overweight woman, right? Like, I don't hit normal beauty standards. I'm a big personality. I'm kind of loud. Like, I have a lot of the earmarks of kind of, I used to not even be able to say bossy woman, right? And so like you as a person can not like me like that. We live in America. We are allowed to believe and feel and think however we want, which is a beautiful thing. But like, this idea is undeniably filled with potential. And so disrespecting the opportunity is what really like got me fired up and really frustrated. So we've not proceeded with them, unsurprisingly. But I think for me, that's really when I think about as being an entrepreneur, a lot of what you're doing is being an advocate for the people who are experiencing a problem. So it's not about the personal slight of someone not paying attention or being rude or dismissing you. They can think what they want about you personally. If you are representing women at large who are having troubles feeding their children, families who don't have access to acceptable infant nutrition. Women who are not experiencing appropriate levels of healthcare or advice, like, you can't dismiss them. You can tell me no, you can't tell them no. And I think, like, if you have a really good idea as a woman, you might feel like sometimes it's you they're dismissing. And I wouldn't get mad about that. They can feel how they want. I'd get mad about if you've got a great idea and you've got something that has amazing potential, that idea deserves to be heard. The voices of the people you're representing deserve to be heard.
So well said. So inspirational. Yeah, 100%. Anything else that we haven't touched on that you think it's important that you want included in this article?
I don't think so. I think more broadly, one of the reasons I went to business school was to feel emboldened to go out and make the change that I wanted to see in the world, to be feeling comfortable enough to take the big risks. And I realized you don't need business school to do that. I did. I think, like, it was the catalyst of having a supportive community around me of people who believed in the power of business for good, especially through the Center of the Advancement for Social Entrepreneurship at Duke. Like, having that network of people who were like, you've got this, you're going to figure it out, it's going to be fine. I needed that. But entrepreneurship can't be taught. Genuinely, like, it's a drive, and it's something that you, especially when you've found a problem that genuinely has to be solved, it feels kind of unstoppable. So what I would say is, I think there's a lot of women out there, especially as we see still traditionally lower rates of accepted female MBAs, and we see programs working to try to get to gender parity. We see a lot of women starting to enter entrepreneurship more seriously and make the roles and companies they want to see exist in the world. You don't have to play by the rules of existing business. Business is changing. There are plenty of us female allies that have been trained traditionally who are not going to give flying fart in space what top 20 business school you came out of or did not. And so stop focusing on the credentials that you need and instead focus on what you need to get done to launch your business.